A species that once roamed the heart of a continent, millions strong, shaping the land beneath their hooves and the lives of those who follow them. The American buffalo, or bison, was more than an animal to the American people. It was a symbol of abundance, resilience, and harmony between nature and the people who lived with it. But, close to the end of the 19th century, that symbol was shattered. From over 30 million to barely a few hundred, the buffalo's near extinction was not a tragedy of nature alone. It was a calculated turning point in American history. Driven by expansion, profit, and assimilation, the destruction of the buffalo marked a step in a movement, the conquest of the West, the assimilation of native nations, and the irreversible transformation of the land itself. This is the story of how a species nearly vanished and how its loss and its return changed the soul of a nation. If you paid any attention in middle school science, you know that every species affects the ecosystem. The destruction of the buffalo herds on the Great Plains in the 19th century represents one of the most profound ecological and cultural tragedies in American history. Before the buffalo's decline, their sheer numbers played an irreplaceable role in maintaining the balance of the ecosystem. Their grazing patterns kept grasses and shrubs in check, allowing for a diverse range of plant species to flourish. This in turn supported countless herbivores and predators that relied on them. Buffaloes were also integral in shaping the very landscape they roamed, from prairies to wetlands. Their absence, however, had far-reaching consequences. Without the buffalo, overgrowth of certain plant species took place, altering the food sources available to other animals. The balance was disrupted in a way that left the Great Plains and its wildlife struggling to adapt. The buffalo were also a source of sustenance for native tribes who had learned to live in harmony with the land. The loss of the buffalo wasn't just a loss of food, it was a loss of culture, tradition, and identity for many Native American nations. The effect on the environment was not caused solely by the loss of the buffalo, but also by the tactics used by hunters during that time period. Once buffalo pelts started to lose their value, hunters searched for other alternative ways to gain more money. It's simple supply and demand. Due to the sheer amount of hunters killing buffalo every day, their pelts, the value started to deteriorate. So, looking for a couple extra bucks, a hunter would leave a carcass on the plain, poison it with arsenic, and hope that a wolf would try to eat it and die a few feet later. So, this small little cash grab ended up destroying part of the ecosystem on the prairie. It wasn't just wolves that would go for the carcass of the buffalo. It was eagles, coyotes, vultures. So this one action could shatter an entire ecosystem, and this is a prime example of how it can. But who's to say this wasn't just accidental overhunting? Irregulated people in a new land unsure on how much or how little they're allowed to hunt. The answer is because of the buffalo's relation to the Native Americans. Buffalo were drastically important to their way of life, and the American government knew that by cutting off their supply to the buffalo, they could cut off the Native Americans completely, or so they had hoped.
It would have been as easy to count or to estimate the number of leaves in a forest as to calculate the number of buffaloes living at any given time during the history of the species previous to 1870. Even in South Central Africa, which has always been exceedingly prolific in great herds of game, it is probable that all of its quadrupeds taken together on an equal area would never more than equal the total number of buffalo in this country 40 years ago. William T. Hornaday.
On the plains, buffalo were everything to the natives. This catastrophic event was not only focused on the economic opportunity for the American people, but there was also an underlying plan, hidden if you do not pay attention to the effects of this slaughter. Buffalo were not only important to the ecosystem, they were integral in the survival of Native Americans in the West. Native Americans used buffalo for so many different reasons, including food, clothing, shelter, and religion. They used all parts of the animal, respecting the soul that was lost. The meat was used for foods, hides and pelt used for clothing, blankets, art, and shelters. Wool was used for string and weavings. Even the bones were not wasted, being used for utensils, decorations, and beads.
Everywhere we were presented with belts, garters, and other articles made with the hair of bear and buffalo, dyed red, yellow, and gray. Father Jacques Marquette.
This respect and resourcefulness was in complete contrast with the American hunters, who would originally just strip the buffalo of their hides, leaving the meat to rot and the bones to bleach. While this did change later on due to the hunters selling the bones and meat, they originally only took the pelts, leaving the rest to rot. These actions were just salt in the wound for the natives, who could no longer use the meat or fur.
The buffalo were the principal support for countless Indian tribes. A single herd could feed an entire village for months. The buffalo provided everything, from food to shelter to clothing. For the native peoples, the buffalo were their lifeline. And when that lifeline was severed, so too was their way of life. President Theodore Roosevelt.
The loss of these creatures led to drastic change for the natives. Hundreds starved, and many ended up passing away. Without their main food source, they were forced to turn to the American government. This was the hidden plan for the Americans originally. They had to go to the government for rations that still barely fed them and give up their way of life so that the United States would help them. This turning point caused them to give up who they were to survive. This event was a major player in the creation of more boarding schools being formed and assimilation. Though the culture of the natives was being suppressed, it was not forgotten by their people. The disrespect of the hunters did not end there. Once the hides started losing value, they went back to reap the plains of the remains of their victims. They took the bones of the American bison left on the prairies to sell as fertilizer or powders.
Even what remained of them was being taken away from native ground. It was like grave robbing, in a way. And Scott Momaday, Kiowa.
The connection to the buffalo was a connection to the way of life. When they were cut off, so was the culture of the natives. By 1883, an estimated 100 million buffalo had been killed. Some estimates claim that over 1,000 buffalo were slaughtered each day, every day, year after year. It was a ruthless campaign with no mercy, driven by profit and imperialistic goals. For native tribes, the loss was catastrophic. Entire cultures were tied to the buffalo. Without them, they lost the primary source of their food, clothing, and tools. Their spiritual and ceremonial life was intertwined with the buffalo. The animal was revered, respected as a gift from the earth.
No one believed, even then, that the white man could kill all the buffalo, even when he did not want the meat. Not believing their own eyes, our hunters went very far looking for buffalo. Nothing. We found nothing, they told us. Then hungry, they stared at empty plains, as though dreaming. Pretty Shield, Crow Nation.
This wasn't simply a biological disaster. It was a profound cultural tragedy. As the American bison vanished, so too did the livelihood of the people who depended on them. The government had no interest in preserving either the bison or the tribes that lived in harmony with them. For many, the loss of the buffalo symbolized the larger struggle against overwhelming forces of colonialism and assimilation. Forces that were determined not only to reshape the land, but to erase the cultures and the way of life that had existed for centuries. This was not just an environmental tragedy, it was a turning point in American history, a moment when the conquest of the West, the annihilation of native cultures, and the reshaping of the land itself collided into a single devastating blow. In the buffalo's extinction, the West was won, but in the process, the soul of a nation was irreversibly altered. The narrative of progress and civilization was built on a foundation of bloodshed and erasure. Not all turning points lead to something good for our nation. Some of them are a lesson. Some of them hurt us as a people to remember. This portion of our history was a major catalyst in enabling the operation of boarding schools and the killing of hundreds, if not thousands, of natives. But, as history often shows, even the darkest moments can be followed by a resurgence of hope. The story of the buffalo is not just one of loss, but is also a story of recovery, resilience, and of a nation coming to terms with its past. Through many conservation efforts, the population of the American bison is now approximately 500,000. While we were able to save this creature, the effects of its slaughter do not go unnoticed. We as a nation have learned from this incident. And as we move forward, personally, I hope we never see another issue like this again.